If you know anything about filmmaking, then you'll appreciate just how difficult it is to get any movie to the finish line, no matter how great or awful it ultimately ends up being. And while many blockbuster projects are firmly well-oiled machines that release without a hitch, there are many more movies that only reach cinemas after going through some serious turmoil. As was the case with the following recent films. So, I'm Ewan, you're watching What Culture, and here are 10 recent movies that were absolute hell to make. Number 10, Monkey Man. Dev Patel's directorial debut, Monkey Man, may not have broken into the same high-tier bracket as other recent action releases, but it did at least demonstrate that Patel has some serious chops behind the camera as well as in front of it. That said, Monkey Man's production was anything but smooth, with Patel himself describing it as, quote, an absolute catastrophe. Shooting was originally scheduled to begin in India in early 2020, but then the little old thing called the pandemic happened, at which point the original production designer and cinematographer left the project, and Patel had to beg his financiers not to shut the entire thing down. Rough. Shooting was ultimately moved to a small island in Indonesia where the entire cast and crew could reside in a bubble in a hotel until production had been completed. Also, due to borders closing during the pandemic, Patel's pool of supporting actors and extras was vastly limited, forcing him to have crew members pull double duty on screen. That was just the beginning though. Patel broke his hand while filming the first action sequence, camera equipment repeatedly broke, and with closed borders preventing new equipment from being flown in, he had to film some shots on mobile phones and use GoPros instead of sturdier camera rigging. The scant $10 million budget also proved problematic, enough that a producer had to use his credit card to buy props. And even once filming was finally completed and Netflix had acquired it, the streamer ultimately decided that the film's political commentary would put them in a tricky position with the Indian government. It was only when filmmaker Jordan Peele saw the movie and persuaded Universal to acquire it from Netflix that it was finally dusted off and sent out into the world. Censorship still sadly intact though. Whew, what a ride. Number 9. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is one of the most jaw-droppingly impressive animated films of all time, and it's clear from watching even a single scene that a back-breaking amount of work went into making it, literally. According to reports that emerged in the wake of the Spider-Verse sequel's release, writer and producer Phil Lord allegedly requested that numerous completed animation segments be changed, with his exacting approach ostensibly causing weeks of lengthy overtime for the movie's animators. The constant revisions reportedly caused more than 100 artists to quit the film before it had finished, with sources citing similar issues on both the previous Spider-Verse movie and Lord's Netflix animation, The Mitchells vs. the Machines. Needless to say, this news casts something of a dark cloud over the film's astounding artistic accomplishments, and it'll be interesting to see if any changes are made to the workflow of the upcoming sequel Beyond the Spider-Verse. Number 8. Sasquatch Sunset. In case you weren't aware, Sasquatch Sunset is a new absurdist drama starring Riley Keough and Jesse Eisenberg, all about a quartet of Sasquatches which live together in the wilderness of Northern California. For the film, the 4 actors spent 2 hours every morning getting into makeup and costume, and then had to spend the entire shooting day sweating themselves silly in the California sun, which is a bit of a far cry from the comfort of everyone getting to ape out with their mates on the Planet of the Apes movies. Eisenberg himself has spoken extensively about the hardships of the process, calling the facial prosthetics, quote, claustrophobic, itchy, and sweaty, before noting that the Sasquatch suits had to be extremely tight in order to convincingly sell the illusion. Just now imagining Eisenberg reenacting that Spider-Man 2 elevate a bit now, where he's all like, it rides up in the crotch a little bit too. Ugh, poor guy. Anyway, in addition to all of that, the cast also went through a comprehensive Sasquatch school acting workshop with a movement and mime coach, who taught them all how to act and vocalize as a Sasquatch. I'm guessing this mime and movement coach is friends with the Sasquatch? I don't know. In any case, it all added up to an incredibly not fun time for those involved, and yet the overall result seems to have been quite worth it, given how convincingly all the actors pass as actual Sasquatches. I've never encountered an actual Sasquatch in the wild, but if I were to, I imagine they probably look a lot like they do in this movie. Number 7. John Wick Chapter 4. Given that John Wick Chapter 4 is the most technically elaborate of all the series films, it's little surprise that it was an extremely tough shoot for those involved, with star Keanu Reeves calling it his most physically demanding role to date. Falling down the stairs repeatedly will do that. The fact that the John Wick films are so intently focused on practical action sequences and tight choreography while trotting across the globe makes them inherently taxing movies to make. The pinnacle of this is the film's third act chase sequence and shootout at Paris's Arc de Triomphe, and because the production unsurprisingly wasn't permitted to shoot at the location for real, they had to recreate the iconic tourist spot at Berlin's Tegel Airport. There, director Chad Stahelski and his crew painstakingly choreographed the sequence, which required cast members and camera crews to weave around cars being driven by stunt drivers with little margin for error. Reeves himself even spent 9 months honing his own stunt driving skills, because, and it kinda goes without saying, he is the coolest man ever. Stahelski diplomatically called it a, quote, pain in the ass, but the end result speaks for itself. All that toil led to the strongest film in the series, and honestly, one of the greatest action films ever made. A grueling process for sure, but one that ultimately must have yielded immense satisfaction from the cast and crew, especially all those incredibly talented stunt performers who are long overdue their own category at the Oscars. Number 6. Hundreds of Beavers. On the polar opposite end of the budgetary spectrum, we have Mike Cheslick's brilliantly unhinged slapstick comedy, Hundreds of Beavers, which was produced for a mere $150,000, and despite being self-distributed by Cheslick, has more than doubled its budget at the specialty box office. The road to release was anything but easy though. Armed with so little money, the entire film was shot by a mere 6-person crew over a period of 12 weeks in 2019 and 2020, most of it spent in sub-zero temperatures in the wilderness of Wisconsin. The majority of the movie's sight gags also required extensive VFX work, with more than 1,500 effects being produced on Adobe After Effects. Post-production and editing took another 2 years after shooting, and though it premiered at film festivals in late 2022, the film then fell upon deaf ears from distributors. And so, the filmmakers took it upon themselves to book Hundreds of Beavers into cinemas across North America, which helped word of mouth spread and allowed it to secure a larger limited release. Number 5. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. It was almost 3 years between principal photography on Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 beginning and the film actually getting released, largely due to production being stalled numerous times by the onset of the pandemic. The stop-start nature of the shoot would be nightmarish for any blockbuster production, but it proved especially challenging for a Mission Impossible movie given the tendency of Tom Cruise and writer-director Christopher McQuarrie to basically write the films as they go along, coming up with the set pieces first and then shaping the story around them. The pressure on the duo was evident, elucidated by a leaked audio clip of Cruise chewing out crew members for skirting COVID protocols and threatening to further delay production. And because the shoot wasn't yet tough enough, pandemic-related travel restrictions resulted in numerous casting changes. Oh, and a large fire broke out on one of the sets too, so add it all with the rest of the fire. That the end result is such a polished, downright amazing blockbuster is impressive considering all that turmoil, but Cruise and McQuarrie aren't quite out of the woods yet either. The upcoming 8th Mission Impossible still hasn't wrapped shooting despite beginning filming over 2 years ago, with recent reports indicating the budget might be as high as $400 million. Either way, McQuarrie and Cruise haven't let us down yet, and I personally can't wait to see what they've got in store. Number 4. The Boy and the Heron. Miyazaki's recent Oscar-winning animation The Boy and the Heron was released last year after 7 years of development, with Miyazaki first starting work on the film in 2016. Though originally aiming to release in 2020, production was slowed by both Miyazaki's more methodical working rate and the impact of the pandemic, which is coming up a lot in this list, thank you for the trauma. This led to the film's budget ballooning, making it the most expensive film ever produced in Japan, and so Studio Ghibli sourced extra funds by licensing much of their back catalogue to streaming services like Netflix. Each of the film's frames was hand-drawn by a team of 60 animators, and even after 3 years of production, just 36 minutes of the movie had been completed. Yet, given that The Boy and the Heron was widely praised by critics and went on to win an Oscar after finally releasing in 2023, all that effort was clearly worth it. Also, hilariously, despite Miyazaki insisting that this would be his final film, after having previously teased retirement several times before that, it was recently confirmed that he's currently developing his next project, so that's cool too. Number 3. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. Love it or hate it, the recent Aquaman sequel was one hell of a rough production for director James Wan, who had to deal with so many factors beyond his control while shooting the superhero follow-up. Though principal photography actually came in on time and under budget, the trouble began in post-production, when the film began scoring poorly with test audiences. Ultimately, Warner Bros. Commissioned 3 rounds of reshoots due to repeatedly troublesome test screenings, with the additional filming reportedly scaling back the screen time of both Mira and Black Manta. This also led to planned cameos by both Ben Affleck and Michael Keaton's versions of Batman being cut. Couple all of this with the looming knowledge of the DCEU's destruction and production reportedly proving so stressful that Wan was hospitalized, and this was basically a perfect storm of awful setbacks. The final film may have been pummeled by critics, but the fact it grossed over $400 million worldwide, still about $100 million shy of breaking even admittedly, is basically a minor miracle. Number 2. Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. While fraught with only a fraction of the hardship that beset the production of Mad Max Fury Road, which saw stars Charlize Theron and Tom Hardy come to blows throughout, prequel Furiosa was certainly no filmmaking picnic either by the sounds of things. The grueling nature of the shoot kind of speaks for itself. The cast and crew spent 5 months in the baking Australian sun in uncomfortable costumes shooting technically challenging stunt sequences on the regular. That amazing focal set piece where the war rig is attacked by the Octobus took reportedly 78 days to shoot by itself, requiring the efforts of over 200 stunt performers to complete. The end result speaks for itself, as Furiosa will be comfortably cemented as one of the action movie greats like Fury Road before it, but it does seem like there was plenty of blood and sweat that went into its production. Lead Anya Taylor-Joy certainly made the above clear during the film's press tour, in between rocking all of those incredible looks. During an interview with the New York Times, she said that she'd, quote, never been more alone than making that movie, and that everything she thought was going to be easy was hard. When the interviewer dug for more information, Taylor-Joy replied with a curt, quote, next question, sorry. Talk to me in 20 years. While we might have to wait a while to learn the particulars of her experience on the film, it's clear that Furiosa wasn't a total walk in the park compared to Fury Road. And number 1, Society of the Snow. J.A. Bayona's Oscar-nominated survival drama Society of the Snow did a fantastic job of authentically and respectfully chronicling the aftermath of a plane crash which left a Uruguayan rugby team fighting for their lives in 1972. But the film's achievements didn't come easy. For starters, Bayona struggled to receive funding due to his insistence to shoot the movie in Spanish with a sizable budget reflecting its scope. Before shooting started, Bayona did extensive research too, recording more than 100 hours of interviews with the accident's remaining survivors, and spent 2 months rehearsing with the large ensemble cast to help foster a bond between them. The shoot itself lasted 138 days, much of which was filmed on location in Granada's Sierra Nevada mountains, as well as the actual crash site in the Andes, where the cast and crew battled harsh weather conditions. And to further complicate matters, the cast also had to progressively lose weight throughout the shoot to reflect their characters' malnutrition, as was supervised by doctors and nutritionists. The result, however, after all of that pain, is one of last year's best films, an arousing, distinctly non-Hollywood tribute to everyone impacted by the events of the crash.